Hello and welcome to Tell Us Your Effing Story, a podcast by franchisors for franchisors, where we go behind the scenes with some of the most interesting characters in the Australian franchising sector. Today, I'm with Jacinta Caithness, principal of Caithness and Co. I'm Bruce McFarlane, your host, and today I'm our co-host, John Sully.
Hello.
So, Jacinta.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Tell us your fucking story.
John, it's your franchising story.
Sorry.
Come on.
Nice. One of the same sometimes.
It has been, but we're going to go right back at the start, Jacinta. So where did you grow up, and tell us a little bit about what did you like to do as a kid?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in Melbourne, and we were here in D Park for the first 5 years, and that was myself, my older sister, and my younger sister, and back in, it would have been, 1985-ish, my dad, who worked for Cadbury Schweppes, got a transfer opportunity to move to Perth in Western Australia. So they took that opportunity and we were there for the next 8 years. And life over there was, to me, the most magical place. It was Surf Life Saving Club every Sunday morning. It was playing hockey. Every day was a play date at someone's house with a pool. It was always warm. You didn't wear shoes all the time. And the hot pavement was just the most relaxing feeling. I played hockey, which for them, not them, the Western Australian side is very passionate about hockey, so that was a fun thing to get into at junior program. And surf lifesaving, did a lot of swimming, competitive swimming, and just really enjoyed a really active outdoor lifestyle. And because it was only our family of five that had relocated and we didn't have any extended family, we spent a lot of time together. And some of our my favourite childhood memories were coming over each year, or every second year actually it was, between Perth and Melbourne to see mum and dad's relatives, their parents and their siblings. And it was, a 7 or 8 day car trip across an Nullarbor plain in a Ford Falcon. There was 3 kids in the back. It was obviously before iPads, and we would have a scrapbook, colouring pencils. Yeah. Most of the time it went really well, but there were times that my siblings and I, we sisters, we do remember that there was, the stitching and the upholstery, and you would not be allowed to cross over your section because, it was a long day sometimes.
I spy crossing the Nullarbor.
All those things. Car games still almost trigger me, in not a healthy way for my own children. But
Where are you in the order?
I'm the middle.
Oh, the weird middle.
The weird middle.
Have to sit in the middle too?
No, because the younger sister was shorter, so you can see better through.
Wow. Yeah. So what did your dad do for Cadbury Schweppes?
He was in operations, so
right.
Isn't it bad that I'm saying operations is a broad subject? I'm not sure exactly what he did back then. He might. Back when I was 8 or 10, I never really knew exactly what he did, but what I did know was that sometimes the cans on the conveyor belts would have defects and little dents and you couldn't sell them, so Dad would be able to bring them home, and in our cellar didn't have any wine in there, but it had cases of soft drink, dented soft drink cans. So this is obviously in times in the 80s where it was all grape and sugar. No one knew exactly how bad it was. And so while we didn't have a pool and we would love going to people's houses for a swim after school, they would love to come into our house because you could come into our cellar and choose from the shelves. Sarsaparilla and creaming soda and all these things.
Chocolate factory.
Everything, it was the place to be. So it was an amazing childhood. And then there was then an opportunity that came up for Dad to then return to Melbourne again with Cadbury Schweppes. And my parents were keen to do that. Their parents, they hadn't seen them for many years in terms of living together. We had cousins that we didn't really know. So, they decided that we would come back. And it was a very mixed response, especially for myself. I think my other 2 sisters relished the opportunity a lot more and settled much better than I did, to be fair, to come back to Melbourne. I don't like change, so that's probably I didn't really know about myself as much as I know now, but it was really hard. And the lifestyle, every weekend was outside over there, and you come into Melbourne, it's freezing. I didn't have any friends here. Starting a new school was really hard. And that family of 5, that dynamic was still very, very, very strong. But obviously, you're all learning how to settle into a brand new area. And I obviously wouldn't change it. It was more that it was so different, and it took a long time to kind of adjust.
So what did your mum do? Was she looking after the three of you?
Yeah,
was she working as well?
Yeah, she worked in Perth, but at an aged care home. So she was, the local mum. Was very much available to us. We were dropped off at school by her every day, picked up by her. But in that time, she needed something for herself. So was in a position where she didn't have to do that, but really wanted to give back. And she's always been really community-minded. And when we returned to Melbourne, she did not aged care, but worked at Belmore Special School as a teacher's aide.
Right.
So she's just a very giving person, very community orientated. And we grew up with both parents in the home, but Mum was particularly a very constant presence. Like, she was always there after school, came to all the school activities, helped out in the canteen, but still had something for her, which is obviously important. I think that too.
I would have thought your dad would be doing, he'd be out the door by 7 and back by 8 or 9 and big days.
Exactly right. So, and I remember we had a circular dining table that was family dinner every night. But that's right. He wouldn't be in the door before 7 or 7:30, because I remember Sale of the Century was on, all those things of, it must be time for Dad to come home, and so, we didn't have a lot of time with him during the week. But saying that, on the weekend, he led the family bike ride around the Swan River every Sunday without fail. That was really important. That for him, that was a connection that he very much valued, which we do too.
And when you came back to Melbourne, where'd you end up at school? Like in?
Yes, I went to QE's Primary.
Yeah.
So we came back halfway through grade 5 for me. So tough time. By then, everyone's made friends and good friends by that time. So but it was a great school and very happy there. And went to Bourne High School for my high school time. And again, hockey wasn't a big thing here, but my parents, in wanting to continue that connection, something that we enjoyed, enrolled us into the hockey club. And it was good also to have friends outside of school for that reason. I joined the basketball team, so I'm quite sporty. There was not the focus on competitive swimming here. I found that was obviously in Perth, and I think
it's cold.
It's cold, yes. And I think as you get older, you've really got to admit, are you going to be in a swimming club and have the 5 a.m. starts, or are you not? And we were not going to be doing that. But still really enjoy, I guess, doing the laps and having that fitness side to myself.
So what were you best at? Hockey? Basketball, swimming?
I would be best at swimming in terms of, the school sports, and was able to get some awards and so on. So I was definitely best at swimming. And hockey I genuinely love it even now. But now I think fear's just overtaken me. And I remember Dad would say when we're going out, because both sisters played, and 2 of us had races, remember, that's a $5,000 mouth you've got there, you look after that. And now I think, with small children, if you got injured, I don't want to have done that to myself, all the big bruises you'd get from a hockey ball coming up at you. So, I'm now just, I should get over that and actually and do enjoy it, but I don't. I'm not prioritising that at the moment.
And what about, like, in high school, what subjects were you interested in?
I loved English. I was saying to my sisters last week, actually, we had family dinner on a Wednesday night, and one of my nieces is in year 11, and we were talking about what study she was doing, and my one regret, if I did have one, I did like English, but chose foolishly now in hindsight to do English Lit, and I should have done business management because that is, I feel like I would have been quite okay at that, and I wasn't great at English Lit. So I got a great mark and was very happy with it. But, you think, what else could I have done? That's something I would have changed. But, I liked PE. I liked all of them. There was something I really didn't love doing. I liked the histories, but also knew that probably I was leaning towards subjects that were going to benefit me over time. I wasn't ever going to do arts at uni or anything like that. So the arts was something I did, geography and history and English Lit, but never really was that passionate about.
So are you smart or disciplined, or both?
I would say it's a good question. I would like to think I was both, but coming into the employment world, and especially mainly the small businesses I've worked with, I find that I'm more street smart than book smart, and I've learned much more on the job than anything I've read. But I enjoy learning.
And so you ended up doing commerce. So
yes.
Was that so when you were thinking of which university, you said arts wasn't for you.
Yes.
So you've obviously had an interest in business from like while you're at school to go down that commerce path, and at Deakin you've studied a bit of marketing, a bit of HR, a bit of broader sort of range of things. Yeah. Did you enjoy university, and what did you get out of that?
Well, I did enjoy university. Commerce, Dad is a huge influence on us, the three girls, and I think we all kind of thought maybe business is the right path. We'd seen that he was successful and it showed, great discipline, and you could do anything and anywhere over the world. So, business was something we were interested in. We were encouraged to read the financial sections of the papers. We were encouraged to read and learn, and getting a good mark was very important from very early on. It was trying your best, and because it gave you options. And then when each of us thankfully did, and then we did have options, and all three of us have tried different areas of business along the time, but all have done also different things, I think, as life's gone on, and you can open different doors. But uni, having got the commerce degree, the acceptance, I thought marketing and HR was what would be, I guess, the two most interesting subjects for me. Probably, I liked the idea of marketing. I love people, so HR to me was a natural thing. But I didn't love uni, and it was a really funny thing because I love learning. I loved study. I was very happy to commit the time to getting the good mark before high school to get that VC result. But I honestly found uni really hard because I couldn't get around that I had 12 contact hours a week. What else was I to do? And it's not. I know it probably sounds kind of unusual, but very quickly, and so within the first 12 months of that degree, I learnt you could do it online. It was correspondence, they called it. So it wasn't as big as what it is, I imagine now, but you could download your lectures and you could do your own group assignment at home. So I thought, well, if I can do that, then I've even got more time. So I quickly started to find other opportunities, other jobs, and thought, how can I actually earn and make this work for me? Because Dad, one of the messages was, you're always going to get ahead. You've always got to be you can't remove the competition, but you can be better earlier. So if I was going to come out of that university course at the same time as everybody else, what was going to set me apart, and having some hands-on practical experience was going to be a very good thing. So I thought maybe a sales rep would be a good thing because I can do that easily while I'm studying, and I can jump in the car, go and stack shelves. So I applied to Arnott's and then Nestle, and was a sales rep for both of those companies whilst I was doing uni via correspondence. And then those two jobs, again, you're still probably doing 10 or 15 hours. There was an opportunity to go to Vodafone. It was called Unidial, but it was a parent carrier with Vodafone. And there was an opportunity for a full-time job, 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. So it was a big commitment, and in hindsight, not something being on the phone, and you'd ring and say, I can't access my PIN code. Can you help my SIM card? Right. Yeah. And it was at night time because, everybody has problems at different times. And that wasn't the only shift available. It was a 24-hour call centre, but that was the one that was available when they were hiring people. And I thought, well, probably that's something I can do because I can still do university. I let go of one of the sales reps, and then the second one followed afterward. And, did uni kind of in the day from home, and then I did the work at night time.
So. Okay, so who was there at 3 o'clock in the morning? Was
me
it just
and
you?
12 other random people in a call centre.
Right.
Yeah.
And did anyone call?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People call. It's an interesting. It's like I went to KFC when I was younger, and just a fast food joint, and customer service is a very enlightening way to meet the world. You expect people are going to transact like you do, and they just don't. And it's the same when you've got a phone that doesn't work. And I think myself, what are you doing? But there's a lot of shift workers that need, that time is good for them to call. There's a lot of people that are out at that time, so they've lost their phone or it's blocked. 5 p.m, they're not going to bed until, 11, 12 at night. So there's a lot of people still out and around.
What skills did you learn, do you think, in those sales jobs and phone jobs? Like what did you pick up?
It was definitely, insight into customer service. Like we were saying, everybody is very different. I think you've got to be calm and patient all the time, and you have to realise that because people don't respond the same way, you've got to quickly work out what they are going to respond to get the outcome that you need. You don't want to escalate things if you don't have to, so you've really got to be quite emotionally intelligent to work out how to diffuse the situation, get the outcome, and then part as with a loyal customer at the end. So those are that was the training, but that's the most effective.
So when was this? What sort of years was this?
I was 19, 20. It was so what was that? 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then, so then your first sort of job out of uni, starting your career, was the early days at Boost Juice. So,
yes.
2002, I think you started there. So,
yes.
Became one of the fastest growing companies, or particularly franchise. We'll get into the franchising later. But so what were the early days like with working with Janine? And, I know there was a pretty small team back then. So
yes.
How was that?
Yeah, it was so unique. Because I had the degree and HR was one of the main focuses. One of the other roles I had was a recruitment consultant for a private agency called Centre Staff. So I'd run that temp desk for about 18 months. Vodafone and Udall had now left, and so I was now, morphing into more of a traditional full-time employee. And this was before Seek, and the Age advertised for a junior HR officer for Australia's largest or fastest growing juice bar. And I honestly thought it was berry juice. I thought it was something far, far bigger. And, I was working with FMCG, so thinking that it must be something like that. I applied for the role, found out it was Boost. And that same weekend I'd been to Southland, which was one of their first stores with a girlfriend. And that was my first try of the product. And I absolutely loved it. I love that they called my name out. I'd never experienced a retail environment like that, so loved it. And then when I found out that was the company, really wanted the job. And it was interesting because having the interview with the Novotel in St Kilda, obviously it was a nice surrounding. I had a coffee, met Janine, had a wonderful interview, thankfully got the job. And then she did say there is no office, it's her house. And I thought, well, that's fine. I like that, I'm flexible, that's fine. Anyway, I came to the house and we still talk about it now. The door opened and there was a Great Dane / or cross bull mastiff. Those horse type dogs. Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a dog person, so that was very alarming. And the door opened. Molly was the dog's name. Came through, and it was a house, in East Malvern. And because that was also the office, it wasn't like going into, I imagine, your homes. It was computer cables, makeshift, duct tape on the floor so you wouldn't trip on the cables. It was not a traditional home that you would have open for inspection. So, it was myself. There was Janine's father, Tom, who was doing the accounts part-time, and there was Janine, and there was an operations person in Sydney. Not Sydney, in Adelaide. That's where the business started. So it was a very, very, very small team, and franchising was just starting. The program had been written, and yes, the business, I guess, was in a position to say that in the advertisement because the intent was great. The intent was going to be very early on that this was going to be a very successful juice business.
How many stores at that stage?
I think there was about 6. Yeah, it was very, very small.
Really?
All in Adelaide?
Yeah. No, because the Southland one was there, but Doncaster, it was before Doncaster. Jam Factory was there on Chapel Street. So, I think from memory it was Southland and Jam Factory in Melbourne, and Adelaide. There was Adelaide. Yeah, so it was very, 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 very small. But in that first week, so I was there, and again, it was, I think on day 6, Jeff, who was doing the leasing, said that he'd done a 16-site deal with Westfield and it was going to happen. So, again, not coming from franchising, not coming from a small business or from a business that was going to be growing at a rapid rate, naivety was the most, I guess, the biggest advantage to myself because I had no idea really what they meant. Is that a big deal? Is it? But now I know if someone said that to me, that's like, you intimately what is involved in that. So most of those stores were going to be franchised. And Janine had a conversation with me and said, look, because they were using an external company for franchise recruitment, we're looking to wind that up. We're going to bring it in-house. It's much more cost effective. What do you think about recruiting the franchisees? And it's still one of those conversations that you replay to think this is the sliding door moment, how life could have been different.
Yep.
And again, it was because I didn't really understand what that would look like and how my recruitment training would have to change for franchising. But in reality, as she obviously saw, it didn't have to change that much. So I was in a good position to do it, and I am a say yes to everything type person. So I was like, sure, I'll give it a go.
Someone who doesn't like change.
I know.
You've changed pretty quickly on the spot.
But I think
say yes to everything.
Yes, like change. I know. What a conundrum. But it is interesting because I was 19 or 20. I had no debt. I lived at home with my parents. What could go wrong?
Nothing worse.
Like whatever it did. If it didn't work, I never. It's very different when you have nothing to lose. You can be in a position to say, sure, and give it a go. And the luxury of that was a wonderful thing. So, I carried HR because the reason why they wanted a HR person, even though they had such a small team, was because they knew that this growth was coming and they had to hire a CFO and they had to hire an operations person. And, she was very, very clever in realising that you could pay recruitment agencies or franchise agencies big hits with each appointment, or you could bring it in-house and make a much more economical hire all the time. So I did HR and was the franchise recruitment person for about 18 months, and then needed to make a choice of which direction do I kind of go with. And by then I just fell in love with franchising and sales. I didn't realise how much I loved sales and got that buzz of recruiting a great franchise partner who was so happy to be chosen. And you're working for a brand that at that time was the most sought after brand in food.
Fantastic.
So you could be in a position to choose the very best of the very best. So we had great people working for us, great franchisees that want to be part of us, and great support from the landlords and the banking, environment. And so it was a really unique time to be part of.
How many did you do in the first 18 months?
There was, I honestly can't remember the actual number, but yes, there was a time when you're opening a store a year, then a store a month, then a store a week, and then at some point there was a store a day. So it was incredibly fast growth. And not just in one state, it was multi-states going at one time. So it was very, very busy, but you became very good friends with the people that you worked with, and you're very dependent on that team, and it did work very harmoniously. And there was Janine, myself, somebody in the leasing side, someone in the law side. Like it was always, you were really dependent on a franchisee comes in, let's make this work as smoothly as it possibly can.
And how is your relationship with Molly? Did that develop
Molly,
nicely?
No, Molly. I was glad to go to the office, which happened, I think, within the first month. I was like, thank goodness. And Molly, I saw at a park from a distance forevermore. Yeah.
But you look, I guess, coming from a background with your dad's involved in business, but not actually the owner of a business. So learning from people like Jeff and Janine that have been prepared to take risks.
Yes.
Now looking back, you go, shit, that's a pretty big risk to take on all those leases in one hit.
Huge.
Yeah. So you've learned a bit about entrepreneurship.
Yes.
A crash course.
Yeah, and you're right. I didn't grow up in that environment at all. Dad's very, very risk adverse. If you have a line of the risk taker and the one who will never take one, he will be very, very firmly down that end. So we didn't grow up in that environment. So watch it is quite an interesting thing to watch unfold, and as we all know, it doesn't always work out well. But I think looking at that business, Jeff, the duo works because Jeff was definitely the risk taker, and Janine could follow and understand that yes, there was something that he could see that perhaps she couldn't, or it was definitely the best decision to go along with that. And he had the risk reward. You have to really take a big bite, I think, to really have the big reward at the end.
I've never met them, but just talking to Christy and who else was working there at Boost for a while? Gavin Meadows. It just seems that they took risks, but they seemed like they bedded it down before they took that risk. I love the fact that they're operating out of their house. They got shit everywhere in the house. Molly's licking people, all that sort of stuff. But I love that. I think they're really just knuckled down until they go, right, let's go.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. And, to be able to have that, to have that lease situation, there was a lot at risk for the family because they did have 3 children at that point as well. So that's even more admirable. You have to think, gosh, like that takes that's a big appetite for risk. And Jeff did have a very secure, well-paying job. So, but it wasn't, that doesn't necessarily mean that there was a safety net. It was still a huge gamble to roll. And you are franchising at this point. So that's even more of a reason. And Janine was very intent on that very early, that she always felt very, very responsible for their success. So it's one thing to do it as corporate and have your own company as stores, but when you're doing it with other people's, third-party capital, franchisees that are looking at you as, the answer, that does weigh on you as well as the actual risk.
And those 6, the Adelaide's ones, they must have been trading very, very well as well.
Yeah, I think definitely the early ones traded particularly well. And, as Janine would say, we didn't invent smoothies, but we did make it cool. And other smoothie and juice bars, there was definitely many of them operating at that time. But it was definitely the brand that you could put in people's hands, and it just exploded with that target market. And over time, it's a brand that continues to the children, the people who grew up with that brand as a 20-year-old like me. Now you are buying it for your children and you're buying a kid size. So it works for families, it works for the individual, it works for the corporate, it works for the fitness person, it works as a snack or a meal. It's a very, very clever way to market a food item.
So how were you, not understating it, but you would have been almost taking orders. If the business was buzzing that much that you, as you said, you had the opportunity to pick the right people. Yes. All the time. I'm sure there was a couple of little mistakes in there that you did along the way. It's never always that rosy, but that process. What did you think you did that well? Like how were you picking these people? Was it gut feel, or were you doing psychological profiling or any of that, all that stuff?
I think we did it very well considering what we knew at the time and what resources we had available at the time. I think that recruitment of people, like we wrote the recruitment methodology based on HR. So you're looking for a particular person. We designed quite a comprehensive application form, thinking that you have to really be serious about this if you want to fill out this 18-page form and give us all this information that we're asking without having met us. So we were quite intentional by having the balance of the right hoops to go through, but still making it fun and getting to know the person at the end of it. But a lot of it was just, an application form, a first interview. The interview had a second interview if you weren't really sure, but it was really more for the franchisee to ask questions and so on. But you are going into, I can't remember many times where you didn't know at that first interview whether it was going to go all the way. And, when I was there in that business, we prided ourselves on the fact that never ever did one person go to final interview to be approved by Janine that wasn't accepted. She had such faith in the system that we were choosing always and putting forward to her the best possible fit, the people that we felt were the best fit.
All owner-managers or any investors in those early days?
No, there's one thing she was very, very firm on, which I totally support now in my business, is you need to work in the business at least the first 6 months full-time. And for her as well, it was really important that there was only siblings or couples. You couldn't just be friends, because friends, businesses, we all know it doesn't always guarantee a successful outcome, and it's our business that we're going to be left with if it doesn't all go well. Which there's no guarantee that a sibling wouldn't break or a marriage wouldn't, but it was one less degree of difficulty in our opinion.
Less chance of blowing up.
That's right. But you could recruit, yes, the best of the best. In our opinion, that was who we were lucky enough to have in our stable.
And on the same theme, trying to find the best people overseas is the next challenge. So you move from running the Australian part of the recruitment side with the franchisees to international, which would have been very exciting. Still young, jumping on planes and flying around the world, and great. But so tell us a bit about that decision. You're obviously involved with Janine in sort of looking overseas, and then probably the next thing is, who were your first partners? And because it's a different thing when you're finding international partners compared to domestic.
Yes, exactly. I was very lucky to be on the board from a very early early stage, and so exposed to those conversations. By then we had Jeff Harris on board from one of the founders of Flight Centre, Rod Young from DC. We had a lot of very experienced international minds, and obviously Rod's experience very deep in international franchising. So once the decision was made to go international, which was made because we could see saturation point was coming, the pace that we were growing was phenomenal, was only going to continue, that we were planning to go offshore, and we were getting many approaches from other overseas parties, and we thought, maybe we can't ignore this. So yes, Janine and I were the two hands-on international people. I think we were both, Janine probably was particularly keen for a change and wanting to, she's interested in travel and overseas markets, and I by then was obsessed with franchising, especially with the international thing, and how could that change and how could we structure that deal and what could that look like. So as a team, yes, we travelled, and we found that we spent a lot of time with Austrade, who at the time were, you could commission them to do a lot of profiling, so a lot of desk research about how attractive a particular country could be for our product, which a lot of it was based on the similarities between Australian consumer and our demographic and our core target market and somebody else in a different market. And New Zealand was one of the first markets that we went to, and famously it did not work. And it did not work because the main reason was the partner that we chose was not the right one, but also because we naively thought that it's Australia, New Zealand, like we don't need to change it very much, and made that classic mistake that many, I think, Australian-based franchisors make when they go overseas and just don't, or they underestimate the differences and the nuances between each country and don't respect enough the changes that you have to make. So we also made the wrong, so that was a big lesson of really make sure that we do alter the menu enough, we do use the language that is appropriate in each country, the terminology, all those little 1%ers are very, very important, but also partner selection. So we were blown away by a guy who, had the right experience on paper, but wasn't a cultural fit for us. And when you are managing a franchise business remotely, when you are doing that international work, it's just so important to have that culture very, very much aligned early on, because we can't be there all the time. And it's still a franchise network. We are still going to be governed by the agreement and both parties respecting that agreement.
So are they there now, Boost in New Zealand now? Do they go back?
I actually don't know. Not sure.
Do you know?
Yeah, no, don't know. But I know that one of the things you had was you sort of a proactive and a reactive strategy around looking at different markets and saying, oh yeah, of course we're going to go here because they speak English and they like juice, and we're going to go here because of that and that and that. But then, surprisingly, other markets that you didn't really think of, people approached you and have gone well. As surprisingly went well. So, so how would that reactive, proactive, strategy work for you?
It's a really interesting question. On the wall of my office, there was a huge map of the world, and there were coloured pins all over it. So they were the pins of thinking we're going to go to these markets. That's what the research says is going to be the most conducive to our concept. But we were always open to getting approaches from excellent people, especially from not just the New Zealand experience, but we knew even from the Australian business that someone with no F&B experience, no franchising experience could actually be phenomenal. So it was very much higher on an attitude train for experience, and we did feel that was still applicable in overseas markets. But when you did have an approach from someone who was very, very passionate about the product, had an Australian connection, had business experience, so again, not necessarily food or franchising, but had run a successful business before and had the capital to be able to pay for the fees, and not just the upfront master franchise fee, but to actually open the units as agreed. It was very hard to say no to those people. So, Chile was an example of that. We didn't necessarily mean to go to Chile in the first 5, but that's what happened. And we had a phenomenal partner there. And, there's many other countries I can think of. Estonia, that you wouldn't necessarily think on paper it actually made sense, but did make sense. Did know where it was, yeah. Didn't know how cold it was going to be, though, until I got off the plane. But, yeah,
So what did you? So New Zealand first, then what?
Chile, yeah, and then there was Indonesia. So we this is when the agreements, the timing of when the deals were signed, might be a bit out of whack. But yeah, at the first couple were New Zealand, the UAE, Chile, and Indonesia. So if you just imagine the map, what that looks like, doesn't see cohesion, but very, very different cultures. And yeah, again, that was the beauty of the product. It can work anywhere with the right people and the right strategy. It can work anywhere, but the people are the most important thing to get right.
So where are they now? What are they everywhere now?
Everywhere, all throughout Asia, not America, but
Right.
all throughout Asia.
Did you have a crack at America when you were there?
Well, there's a company called Booster Juice, which is a Canadian-based store, actually in Oregon. That's their equivalent of Boost Juice. They're the main one, with Jamba Juice dominating the rest of North America. So we were in discussions with them. Jeff, Janine and I went over there and had a series of discussions with the founders of that brand. But that was kind of the essence of it. Maybe we team up with you and go North America, or we do the rest of the world on our own. And as it was, that transaction didn't eventuate. But with Jamba Juice there and with the domination of that brand, it wasn't that we were frightened to go there. It was more that the opportunities outside of Australia and outside of America are so good and are closer to home. So
What's the point?
yeah, they now Boost dominate all of Southeast Asia, the Middle East, parts of throughout Europe. It's really, you couldn't do that, I don't think, as well if we had to just focus solely on America.
And around that time, you're fortunate to win some awards, so congratulations. So, Telstra National Young Businesswoman of the Year, the Victorian Businesswoman of the Year,
Really?
AFR Boss Young Entrepreneur, Young Executive, of the Year. So, fantastic to be
cool.
recognised. And, I know that at the same time, Boost as a business was also winning awards. And so, what did winning those sorts of awards mean for you in your career?
Well, it was a huge personal achievement. Janine nominated me for those awards. That was a wonderful thing. She herself had won the Telstra Award. So, and as you mentioned, Boost was definitely getting celebrated. So it was a really unique, amazing journey. And the personal awards were wonderful because you, like all of us, you do it very hard, and it didn't always feel like work because I genuinely loved it so much. And my best friends are in that business and still now, because of that, how unique that was. But it was nice to be recognised, I guess, and it did open more doors for me personally as well, which was always a nice thing. But, yeah.
And then, so, then it all good things come to an end at some stage,
Yes.
other than the friendships, which I know you
Yes.
still have.
Yes.
So, after Boost, there was lots of different opportunities that came your way, and some of them in companies that were growing, and others in companies that were probably, as John, the sunset rather than the sunrise type companies. So
Yes.
the ones that I know a little bit about, Red Group Retail and Kiki K, were two businesses that you
Yes.
worked in. So tell us a little bit about the book industry, stationery, after being in Boost and
Yes.
food.
Well, it's a funny thing because I was saying before, going from WA, and it's all sun and outdoor and everyone's loving life and it's wonderful, and then you come to Melbourne. It's not that you don't love Melbourne, but it's so different, and it takes a lot of time to get your head around. The climate's different, the culture's different, all of that, and that is almost how I would think the leap or the departure from Boost to go to Red Group, because you could not get to more stark, diddly different environments. And I thought that's what I wanted. I thought that I wanted to be able to go from small business, entrepreneurial, homegrown, where the pace was phenomenal, but it was sink or swim, which I loved. But I thought, I wonder what a more corporate structure, it was PE funded, and I loved Borders. So Red Group Retail had Borders, Angus & Robertson, Dimmicks, not Dimmicks, sorry, Whitcoulls in New Zealand. So it was a collection of book retail brands, and I thought maybe I was ready to do something completely different and learn a different environment and a different way of working.
What year was this?
It was like 2007. Oh no, 2009. I think it was. Yeah, 2009. Yeah. So I was just turned 30. A lot happened in that time. So I went to Red Group Retail and it was there for 10 months, and the business went under.
Because they had about 16 stores, didn't they?
Yep.
And there were some that were just shit. but there were some that were absolute crackers.
Like Carlton was like, it's still people talk about, Carlton, and it was a phenomenal place to work in that it was similar to the booze culture, and that people who worked there loved working there. And if you were a reader, if you're like I was, you would know. It was fun to know 12 months ahead what books were coming out, and all that was great. But you had a lot of people working there who were very, very book people and didn't necessarily love the business side of it, or didn't feel as comfortable in the business side. And it was an interesting part when it went into administration. It's very interesting for any brand when you've got multiple brands that are competing against each other, all owned by the same person. There wasn't the right discipline lined up between each brand, so that there was just mass cannibalisation in the end.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that they really could have. We had a look at that when it went under, and there were 5 or 6 stores that were trading very well, but they had no stock, and it was old stock. Yeah. Just if that was handled properly, that should be around today and trading very, very well.
Yeah, well, you look at the success of Readings. I mean, Readings is just an iconic book brand here in Melbourne, and that's what Borders was largely based on. But obviously, it's an American franchise or a licensed arrangement, and it had the size that was like a Starbucks place to kind of hang. But yeah, when you dissect it, it's great lessons of what not to do, I guess, and that was important.
So what was the biggest lesson was the competing brands, because lots of people do that. So that's interesting. That does work.
Well, if you have the right disciplines in place between them, it can. But in our, worst case scenario, you had the same book on the same promotion at the same price, selling to the same customer. So it's just not sustainable.
And Kiki K, so obviously it was a fast-growing business, also run by husband and wife entrepreneurial team, and with international expansion ideas. So. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so I left, obviously, Red Group, and I took about 12 months off then, or 18 months, and just travelled. So even though I travelled a lot with Boost, I hadn't done a lot of personal travel. So after the Red Group experience, it was time to leave. I'd met my husband at Red Group, so that was a great outcome that happened. And then that's right, it was a win. And then came back, and then I was still in contact with Janine, obviously, and she was having a lot of people, contact her and say, look, I'm thinking of franchising. Do you know of anyone that can help me? And Kiki K was a company that she was at the time on the board of, and said, look, maybe talk to Jacinta. So met with Kiki K, and it started off as a 2-day-a-week kind of consulting arrangement. At the time I was thinking of franchising some of the units here in Australia, but and yes, international, having kind of exposure international. So it definitely sounded like me. Again, I love the product. I was a customer. It's really important to me that I actually work with companies I really like. And because of the experience ending like it did, maybe I thought, well, maybe small business is for me. I just should stick in that world. And yeah, had I think it was like 2 years that Kiki came in the end, but still only just doing that those 2 days a week. And I enjoyed it. To a point. I think that it was a very unique culture. I think a Scandinavian brand. There was a lot that I loved about it, a lot that really resonated with me from a consumer point of view. But the part that I didn't enjoy, or I guess why it wasn't sustainable, was that there wasn't really the appetite truly for franchising. It was at the time a necessary strategy as opposed to a desired one. So because of the way that the stores were trading and it needed funding, franchising did make sense. I can understand why it was suggested, absolutely, but unfortunately there wasn't the support for that properly at board level to be able to properly commit the resources to do that. So it was a little bit of a role where I felt kind of in limbo of are we doing this or not? I'm paid to be running the strategy, but do we really want to do this? So it wasn't, I guess, a really rewarding role. But I understood, franchising not for everybody. And they never actually ended up franchising, and I think probably was the right outcome for them. So it did work out the right way for them. But yes, it was probably a stepping stone for me. Again, no regrets, but one that just didn't work out.
Probably it was interesting. They, possibly they grew fast as well, but possibly didn't get the same deals on the leases, and
Yes,
so they were looking to franchise their poor performing sites, which is not always, you talked about Boost and the way that Janine was really, really passionate about the success of the franchisees. And if you're going into franchising just trying to get rid of your shit, it's not a great way to go into it. So it was probably, you're right, a good way, that a good result, although ultimately the business had other challenges, possibly because they had too many sites. They'd taken on sites that weren't great sites anyway. And then out of those roles, I know there was a couple other, but PwC, so in the news a lot at the moment, but this is way before all those things were happening.
Can I just ask, I don't know how much time we've got left, but did you take a fair confidence hit after Red Group? Because you said, I think small business. Why was that a confidence hit for you?
I think I was big fish in little pond at Boost. I was very confident. I was on the board. I knew there was not one part of that business, especially the franchising areas and the areas that I looked after. Because when I left, I was CEO of International, but COO of the Boost Investment Group. So, my remit was amazing. We were looking to buy other brands to come under our umbrella. I had a lot of different units reporting to me: design and development, purchasing. It was a phenomenal role, and the Red Group one was group brand and strategy director, so a senior executive role. It was a very interesting time to be part of that business for what we've discussed. But yes, it did make me think maybe that's I'm not good at the culture side, the political side. I don't like that side. So maybe I just would ignore that. And you work hard, but it's not in your control. That's what I thought was the hardest thing. I could not impact change in that business. It was too big and too many egos and too much politics. And you go to a Boost and that just didn't exist. You wanted something happened to launch the next day, that had happened. In a Red Group or a business of that size, in my experience, was that you could talk about it as an idea, then you have a second meeting to talk about it again. Let's have another meeting in 3 months to make sure we still think it's a good idea. And it just became very frustrating, I think, to me.
So then you've moved to PwC, Australia's largest consulting.
Yes. High five to me.
I don't like change.
And now I'm at a big place
where
there's
committees to decide what the committees can do.
That's right. That's the thing, that the Boost experience, AE's there in that journey, and it was very, very hard. To leave that business was incredibly challenging. I think it would have happened, it didn't matter where I went. Nothing was going to compare to that. It's like having the best love of your life, and then afterwards, who's going to compare to that? It was a really weird way to start. Most people, I think, if you're lucky enough to have that feeling and have that employment, it happens kind of at the end of your career, or toward the end. You work up to it, whereas mine happened really early at the very, very start. So it's the PwC one came again at a good time, because ideally Red Group would have worked. Ideally KK would have worked, and that was the intent going into them. And there's not much I could or would do differently to make that outcome any more successful for myself or for the businesses. PwC was an interesting one, because so by now I'm consulting to a few other people, but I'm self-taught. So everything I'm consulting is the experience of Boost or the lessons I've learned, but not actually being trained by a team of consultants. And PwC, when they approached, I thought, oh my God, how can I not do that? So they were looking at the time to really ramp up their franchising practice, because while they're an accounting firm first and foremost, they were committing more and more resources to developing their advisory side of the business. And Greg Hodson was their franchising partner. So I really had a great rapport with him, loved what they were looking to do, and they were attracted to myself, because while they had a lot of book smart people, they didn't have anyone they could really put client facing who had done it before. So it was a win-win for both of us. And I was there for, I think, 2.5, 3 years maybe before I fell pregnant with my first child. And if I didn't, though, I'll rephrase this, but it wouldn't have continued, because there wasn't really the appetite amongst the partner network to commit to the franchising side. Greg was really holding a flag on that island, and it was a hard ask, I think, for him and for us and our team, which was a small team of 5 people. We enjoyed it. We liked the work we did. There's a lot of great reports and work that came out of that clients benefited from. But it was an accounting firm, and I think that it will always be an accounting firm.
So before we get to tips, because we don't have that much time left, but I'm just going to, you've been on, after your consulting roles and having the kids, the board roles that you've had. So Ventura Bus Line, Silk Laser Clinic, Schnitz, Empty Esky, Keith Training, Fuse Recruitment, and Hatch. You've got a lot of diversity from all sorts of different sectors. Not all retail, not all food. So how have you enjoyed the board roles, and what do you feel you bring to the table on the board roles?
Yeah, look, it's been great. I think when I left PwC, I was pregnant with that number one child, like I mentioned, and just love. And I knew it would happen to me. I just love being a mum, and I've got 3 children now, and because of my mum doing drop off every day, pick up every day, that's really important to me. And when I can make it happen, that is definitely the priority. But the board roles are great because that does afford great flexibility. So I have that portfolio of 5. I know all the different meetings I'm going to have for the next 12 months, and I can structure ad hoc consulting around that if I like to. And that's a wonderful position to be in because, like I mentioned before, I loved GK because I was a customer. I love Bougie because I was a customer. I can now choose to work with clients that I really do like. I like the product, or I really like them personally. And now I feel more confident having that conversation, not just sharing the Boost journey and all those lessons, but those years at PwC of proper corporate training and discipline and strategy work. I feel more equipped to have those consulting conversations, but that's what lends itself to a board role too. Sitting around lots of diversity in the portfolio, in also diversity in the people I work with, that I'm learning. Hopefully my intent is that you're adding value every meeting and imparting knowledge, but you're also learning yourself, and that does happen at a board discussion because you're all surrounded by people who have done many different things in their experiences, and that's the intent, to work together as a team, as that resource to that founder or that business to help make everybody, all stakeholders, more successful. So yes, I really enjoy it, and yes, it allows me to still be a really hands-on mum, but still tick that mental box for me. I like working and I like learning, so the board roles give me that opportunity to do both.
You go.
No, you go.
Because I'm going to open up a huge can of worms.
Sally's going to round us up. We'll let her think about the thinking music for the tips before.
Oh, yes,
John's
tips. Yeah,
but John's question.
I know when I left, when we sold Michelle's, I wanted to prove that it was that I could do it myself. So I went out and we started looking at brands and all that sort of stuff. And long story short, we did a good job with it, but we fucked it up and lost a lot of money. And I look back and go, okay, well, where do I add the most amount of value? And I know exactly where that is. And my success came from the people around me.
Yes.
My question to you is, you've left a business that was on fire, and you're probably thinking, I'm young, I've been there and I've done that. You're obviously a very driven individual and you wanted the next challenge. Were there elements of you going, I want to see if I can crack it on my own? Or were you just like, okay, now's a great time to get out at the top?
No, I think it's a great point. I've always said, if I had an idea, if an opportunity came by that I thought that's it, I would be doing it in a heartbeat. Because I think I want to die wondering. I'd love to know what that experience is like. So I'm not afraid of the risk. So even though I have that background, I now have been surrounded by people like Janine for most of my life now to show me that no, it doesn't always work, but yes, it's worth having a chat or having a crack. My challenge is I just have not come across that thing or been at the right place at the right time to truly have one. So I invest in a number of businesses. I'm happy to do that, but no, I don't have anything to call my own, and would be open to it definitely, because like I mentioned, I don't want to have any regrets and think, and my husband's the same way. We often say, like, if you had that one thing, you'd both, and how great that you've got 2 of you that want to do that. But what that looks like, is it a franchise? Is it a new system? Is it what does that look like? I'm not sure, but yes, definitely open to it.
Good on you.
Okay, as we finish up, any tips you've got for franchisors?
Yes,
You know, as a little
yeah.
journey. You've worked with lots of them over the years now.
Yes. One that I say all the time, it's actually not mine, but Jeff Alice's one, but he kind of had in our minds all the time was grow fast but safely, which when I say to clients, they all respond to that, because you all want good growth, but what does safely mean? And it does mean not taking on too many sites that you can't obviously support them properly, not compromising on the quality of the people that you are taking on. So franchisees, for example, you may not be in a position of where Bruce was at the height where I was there to choose the best of the best, but still doesn't mean just doing the check in the heartbeat franchising. You know, really make sure that you don't compromise on the quality of the people that you're taking. And a personal mantra of mine, as you both know, is say yes to everything. So it doesn't always relate to franchising, because you know it's a you know, like those first two tips are more traditional business tips, but for personal growth, yes, I think that's really important. Just you never know what can happen. Live life.
Can I, of all the discussions that we've had around Boost,
Yes.
my big takeaway for everyone that's been involved in it is they made sure the franchisee was making money. That was the number one priority. You can't fuck it up if you have that approach.
No.
And it's, believe it or not, that trait or that thought process is not that common.
No, I would agree with that. Yes, and I think that's right. A lot of companies seem to franchise by default. It's not their preferred strategy. They do it because they have to, and that is like what we were saying before, is the worst possible way to do it. Others do it because they're making some money, but it's too hard running company-owned stores, so they think, oh, let's just give it to somebody else. But that's the thing, you know, one of the many reasons why Jacinta is so successful, and Jeff, is because they had that mantra. That you were never going to set someone up to fail, ever.
Yep.
So
that's good.
You had to make sure that you would never, ever take on a site as a franchise if you weren't going to do it company-owned. Never. And all those disciplines we were all trained in. So we all came out of that business, and many of us are working in franchise networks around Australia, and hopefully that's just going to, you know, penetrate many different systems, because we learnt very early on that's right. You're playing with people's homes and mortgages, and you have to, and also if they fail, we fail as well. So that's, you know, defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for
You're
spending
welcome.
some time with us today.
Me. Thank you.
Thank you, even though you're full of shit because you don't like change.
So true. Yeah. Maybe I've obviously become better at it over time.
I think so. Well done. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.